Okay, I have 5:15 on my clock. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up? Okay, good. And I'd like to call the planning and budget meeting to order. First of all, can we have roll call? Ms. Schultz.
Anderson,
Here.
Miller, Wong.
Here.
So I have Anderson in the boardroom, Wong virtual, and Miller is absent.
Okay. Megan had mentioned that she's doing her civic duty and helping out the polls today. So hopefully I'm sure it's quite busy. Okay, first of all, can we have an approval of the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Okay, and I will second that. All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. 1D is approval of the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from the October 6th, 2020 Planning and Budget Committee meeting.
Okay, and I will second that. And so all those in favor of approving the minutes from the October 6th, 2020 Planning and Budget Committee meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Or opposed, I guess none. Motion carried. All right, so we'll move on to 2A, which is the Equity Consulting and Training. Dr. Keyser, I believe you and Joanne are going to be presenting on this.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Wong. A while back, when I first started, we had talked about getting an RFP out for our equity work, which is aligned to our core values, as well as a part of the work that we wanted to do moving forward. All right, I'm not sure if there's some feedback coming through.
I was going to say the sound quality, the audio sounds pretty bad.
Is that better? Yep, there we go. We had a random speaker that was on. So,
okay.
Let me start over. So, a while back we put out an RFP for doing our equity work. A year ago, the district had put out an RFP and it had not moved forward. So we made the decision to rescind that work and to start over again. So we sent out a new RFP aligned to our core values and the plans for our district's work moving forward. We submitted the proposal and received 6 proposals back. We put Ms. Armstrong received all of the proposals. Both her and I had gone through the proposals in alignment with the work and the direction our district has been going through, and we ranked them in terms of the sheet that's attached. And the Campbell group. Sorry?
Dr. Keyser? Yeah, the sound quality is still terrible. You're cutting in and out.
Okay. That's us. Is there an additional speaker that's on? Let's try that. How's that?
Keep talking.
All righty. As soon as it starts to garble up again, we'll stop. So as part of our RFP, we received 6 proposals back. Ms. Armstrong and I both reviewed them, aligned to the work that our district has been moving forward with the idea of instructional coaching, framework, equity, and our strategic planning process. The sheet that is listing all 6, the Campbell group is the group that is not the lowest, it is not the highest, but is aligned with the work that we see our district moving forward with and are making the recommendation for this committee to approve the Campbell Group and, moving forward. And I'll open up for questions. Ms. Armstrong, is there anything you want to add?
I don't have anything to add. I will tell you that the sound has been horrible through this whole thing. It's almost like somebody has a phone on or something, because we're getting a lot of feedback and a lot of cutouts.
I would agree.
Do we need to retry calling into the?
It's actually through the phone line. So those of us listening off site, your voice is coming through the phone line rather than the mic.
All right, how's that?
Thank you.
So all right. Okay, we're going to try to dial out and dial back in.
Okay. Board Member Anderson, did you have any questions regarding the equity training and consulting and training?
I did not.
What's that?
We just have to wait and, yep. Now can you hear us? We dialed out and dialed back in.
Welcome to Google Meet. Enter the meeting sound key. Thank you. You're muted because a lot of people are on this call. Press *6 to unmute.
The ultimate objective of this.
You unmuted yourself.
As far as the past history, farther back than the 5 years that I have been here, I have not participated or been aware of an equity audit. That was something that was on our radar for last year, and we had gone through the process and selected a contractor, and that was overturned later in the year when Dr. Keyser came, and we wanted to clarify what our scope and the role and vision that we had, so we rebid the entire process. Ms. Beavers has been in the district a little bit longer. She may have a more insight to that, but I do not know of a equity audit that we have done in the past 5 years. And I'll let Dr. Keyser address the scope of what that looks like at our schools and how we're going to roll this program out.
Okay.
Certainly. So in terms of the scope and how we are moving this work forward, the approach that the Campbell Group, and it sounds like we're still getting the feedback. I don't know if we need to mute the phone number. Okay, so we muted the phone number, and I think that took care of it. So the scope of the work is going to be around training and coaching, building capacity around equity, cultural competency, as well as those culturally and linguistically sustaining and responsive instructional practices. The goal is that of the group is to build the capacity of the district and of each school. So what they're planning on doing in their approach is to start off with the equity audit to identify both at the district level and then down by school levels a comprehensive view of our district from the standpoint of equity, and then building up from that, building capacity at each and every level. So the idea of equity work is that essentially the question that they will be asking at the district level is, what does an equitable district look like for Beloit? And as we answer that question, we develop a vision and we develop that long-term equity plan, and then we build systematic steps to identify from the equity audit, which is where we are, and what does an equitable district in Beloit look like, where we want to go, and build a plan that goes from here to there. We do that work at the district level with a cross-functional team. So part of the board's work in the past has been the E-Equality Committee, which when I came on board, the goal was to reestablish that committee as a superintendent's advisory committee. I look at that committee as being the district level team that is going to be doing the work coming forward. And then at the building levels, each building would develop an equity team by which they would do the work at the building level moving forward. Their goal is not to try to do a one-shot, do everything at once, but to do it in terms of stages and do 3 to 4 schools across in a year, building the capacity and building the sustainability of each building and of the district to carry this work forward. Their goal is not to say that equity work can't be done without their assistance. Their work is about building the capacity for the district to develop a vision and develop the capacity and the skill to do this work on its own after they have done their work over the course of 3 to 4 years.
Or is this something that's been around for a number of years?
Could you say that once again? Sorry. Thank you. Equity training and equity audits have been around. I can remember my first formal training around equity back in 2006, 2007, when I was administrator in another district, and have been doing work before that. And I know the work has been going on even prior to that. Equity audits have been going. I've been at least a part of 2 equity audits in 2 prior school districts. And equity audits have ranged from doing internal equity audits as well as hiring outside firms to come in and conduct an independent equity audit.
Let me pull that up here. And I appreciate the breakdown of your analysis of the various, was it 6 groups that you analyzed? And this one seems to have, besides the one that was kind of off the charts as far as price goes, this one seemed to have the most longevity. Now, it's my understanding as well that their goal is also to eventually make it so that we can do a lot of this on our own and we're not reliant on this group going forward, or that we're continuing the training.
Correct. The goal is not to their perspective is not to the district be dependent on them to do this work. Their goal is to, through coaching and capacity building, to develop our skill and capacity to do this work moving forward on our own.
Okay. Was that the case with all of the groups that you had RFPs from?
No, that is not. There were some groups that were very limited in a la carte style in terms of the work, and others that in the nuances, as they read, basically said, not explicitly, but certainly in the language, said, we're looking for a long-term relationship to ensure that the district stays on an equitable pathway, which really is fostering that sense that you can't do this work without us, and that was not something that we were looking for.
Okay. Maybe this is just my perception of it, but does it seem kind of odd that a district with our diversity as far as the students go and our within our district and community, that it's been a long time, if ever, that we've gone through this type of training and consulting before?
From my perspective, which is short and limited, I would say from my listenings, it sounds as if we've tried to do some equity work internally. And there have been some initiatives in which equity consultants have come in, but they've been more, at least shared with me, workshops and presentations, and they've not had longevity to the work. I cannot speak to if there was a district outside of the Equality Committee, which had been established a long time ago. I don't know if there had been a concerted equity training initiative outside of that one committee.
Okay. All right, and that makes sense too. All right, I don't have any other questions. Board Member Anderson?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Do we have any recommended action?
I would like to have the Planning and Budget Committee recommend this to the full Board of Education. Move approval of the Cambo Group, personnel and equity consulting and training in the total amount of $181,000 over 3 years.
Okay, and I will second that motion. So we have the recommended action. The motion on the table is the Planning and Budget Committee recommends to the full Board of Education move approval of the Cambo Group proposal for equity consulting and training in the amount of $181,000 over 3 years. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. We'll move on now to 3A, which is the program's curriculum and materials. We have the 2020 and 2021 science pilots, and that would be Ms. Grorud and Ms. I don't want to.
I'll introduce her, that's fine. Hi, thank you, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. We've got a small presentation here. And as I do, I'm going to introduce two people who are joining me today. So I am Kelly Grorud, Dr. Kelly Grorud. I am the Director of Instructional Leadership and STEAM for the district. And presenting with me today will be Meredith Falkevich, who's our STEAM coordinator for the district and works at in the Collect Center with me. We also have joining us today Joe Warenberg, and Joe is actually one of our instructional coaches at Robinson, but he does a lot of work with our 4th grade math and science teams as well, and so he's been a part of our pilot program. and has offered to join us tonight. So Meredith and Joe, I'm going to invite you to step in if I miss something important here as we go. Whoop, gotta get on my right screen here. So we're going to be requesting to move forward with a couple of pilot curricular resource programs that we would really like to pilot in terms 2 and 3. But before we do that, we really wanted to give a background. This is our first opportunity as a team to come in front of the board. So we wanted to give you a quick overview of sort of how we're grounding our work. And so you'll see here that Meredith and I have really laid out a goal for our district to engage all students using STEM to solve rigorous, relevant, and real-life problems. And when we've been meeting with teacher teams, we've been sharing with them this goal and the sort of guiding principles that you can see here in our bullet list as just sort of an anchor point for our work. And you'll notice that equity is a big part of what we're paying attention to as we start to think about science curricula and what we want to do in the district. Really making sure that we are thinking about authentic tasks for students so that they're getting those 21st century skills. We really want to create growth mindsets, not just for our students, but for our teachers as well. So we want to adopt curricular resources that really stretch us as a district and get everybody kind of engaged in that learning process. And then we really want these curricular tools to be joyful, really fun to use. I mean, I would love to be in science classrooms and see both teachers and students very, very excited about the learning that's going on. So if you aren't familiar with the instructional shifts that have happened in NGSS, around 2013, many states adopted the Gen Science standards. Wisconsin was one of them, and the district does use these standards. And these really came out of about 15 years worth of thinking on what does it take to really build 21st century learners in science. And if you think back to your own science instruction, I know mine was very, what we used to call the basket of facts. You know, the teacher made you memorize periodic table or some set of vocabulary words, you know, fill in the worksheet, that kind of stuff. We're really shifting away from that form of instruction and really trying to anchor what we do in more systems thinking and modeling, really helping students do better investigations, not just conducting investigations, but starting to come up with their own as well, discussing open-ended questions, having debates, reading, writing, talking about what they're learning, connecting their science learning with math and data analysis. And then also one of the big shifts for NGSS was really to actually bring in engineering standards as well. So connect their science learning with design thinking and testing and prototyping and those kinds of skills. So NGSS really has what they call a 3D approach. When we look at any of the science standards, the standards will describe not just the concepts and the skills that we want students to have, but those practices and mindsets that we want them to really engage with, and then cross-cutting concepts that they start to develop in kindergarten and really build on all the way through their high school experience. So things like pattern recognition, prediction, cause and effect, those kinds of things. So as we think about our current curricular resources and the ones that we want to have, we are really wanting to tightly align our adopted curriculum with those next-gen science standards and the principles that are found in them. And that means that we are looking for resources that really integrate the practices, the concepts, and those skills and the cross-cutting concepts together. They can't be taught in silos. They have to be taught in an integrated fashion. We are really cognizant that as we look through these resource materials, no one is probably going to meet all of our needs as a district, so we have been paying very close attention to the kinds of resources that best fit our needs and best help us address instructional gaps that we have now or learning gaps that we have now. So just a quick word about our current resources. So we are going to be asking to pilot the two resources that we'll share here in a minute, but these are from 4th through 8th grade, so our intermediate level grades. And our 4th and 5th grade students right now are using a curricular resource that is produced by National Geographic. Our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are using a separate resource that's called iQuest. It's produced by Activate Learning. Both of these curricular resources were really written shortly after the Next Gen Science Standards were published. And so as we've gone through the last 7 or 8 years, it's become really clear that neither of these resources are designed for NGSS all that well. They actually are not designed for that integrated 3D learning that we were just talking about. In addition, the usability, particularly with iQuest for teachers, has been a barrier. Many of our teachers find the platform challenging to navigate. Our DLI teachers in that particular program also don't have access to the same resources that our monolingual teachers do. So we have had to make extra copies of things, try to actually make hard copies of resources for them that they only get in electronic format when our monolingual classrooms actually get them in print. Our current 4th and 5th grade, the Nat Geo sequence, was really adopted at a time when we were offering science at that grade band every other day. And so the course materials are really not designed for a full year of instruction. We've gone through the process of trying to supplement them this year with Mystery Science and Legends of Learning so that our teachers can have a full year of science. But there are just some pretty big challenges with these two programs. So our contract on these two is up at the end of the year. And as we move forward, we're not interested in renewing these contracts. We really want to move on to something that might better meet our needs. So it turns out that NGSS and quite a few other professional organizations provide some guidance to districts on how to go through the process of reviewing and adopting new curricula. And so Meredith and I have spent quite a bit of time looking at these documents, and there are some commonalities between them. So we wanted to share with you what our look-fors are as we're kind of going through our curricular materials. So you can see on the district look-fors, those are the things that as we have gone through NGSS and NSTA and some of the other professional materials that are out there, those are things that they recommend that you rate potential curricula for. So again, equity, technology, that 3D learning, 3D assessment materials, standard alignment. Really importantly, more and more professional organizations are not just asking districts to look for opportunities for student collaboration, but for them to engage within their communities as well. And Beloit has a lot of opportunities for science learning that we should really be engaging our students in. And then evidence of student outcomes, and not just with science, but also with math and literacy. As we went through the process of previewing materials with teachers, which Joe is going to talk about here in a minute, we actually asked the teachers to also give us what they were looking for. So as experts in their classroom, what are the things that they need out of a curriculum that they're not getting right now? And you can see that their list actually mirrors ours in a lot of ways. So again, they're looking for equity and representation of their students, accessibility. In particular, they named accessibility with Spanish materials for English language and support for English language learners. Technology, multimedia engagement, the usability of the materials for the teachers and the students, and then literacy and math development. So we really have a lot of alignment with what the teachers are needing too. And these are the things that we are looking for both in the materials that we want to pilot, and if we start to think about adoption, this will be what we use to measure against the materials that we're looking at. So I'm going to hand it over to Jen to talk a little bit about the previews that we've done with these two materials. But before I hand it over, I just want to say we have been very cognizant of the fact that the teachers have historically felt like the district office has picked curricular materials for them And so we are trying to be mindful of the fact that we want to do this work with our teachers and really give them a voice in this process. And so Joe's going to talk a little bit about what we've done so far, and he actually was one of the participants in the preview session. Go ahead, Joe.
All right, thanks, Kelly. So as Kelly stated, we first had to find out what we were looking for in a curriculum, and then it was a curriculum resource, and then it was our job to choose a couple to pilot. So in October, we invited 4 vendors, STEM Scopes, HMH Dimensions, Twig Science, and Amplify Science, to preview their curricular resource materials for a group of teachers and building administrators during one of the district PD times. And I'd just like to give credit to Meredith and Kelly and say that this pilot preview is very well put together. The participants were given a chance ahead of time to preview each of the curriculums, as well as look at the criteria for the rubrics that we would be using to assess each of the programs. The teachers were able to provide feedback on a number of related items. And then so the related items, you can see they would provide feedback on curriculum elements, learning and assessment, literacy and math development, accessibility, equity, teacher usability, and technology integration. And then after each of the presentations, the teachers and administrators were given about 30 questions to rank all those aspects within each program. And there was also a section provided for open response as well. So throughout the 4 schools the 4 intermediate schools that were represented, we had 33 responses on the survey. And then at the end of the presentation, we also asked each participant to rank the 4 programs from their top choice to their last choice. And then we'll take a look at the results on the next page. So here are the results of the survey, and you can see on the chart there, the X's represent the categories in which the resources were ranked with the highest scores by our teachers. There were 2 sources, HMH Dimensions and STEM Scopes, that were not ranked highest in any category. And these 2 resources we're not planning on piloting. By overall score in the survey provided, Amplify Science was the top choice of the teachers. Second was Twig. But then when asked, this is a little bit different, when asked to rank their choices from most to least favorite, Twig was actually the top choice and Amplify was the second. So for those reasons, we're going to request the opportunity to pilot both of these resources in the upcoming months.
All right, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about both of the resources that we would like to pilot. The first is Twig Science, and Twig Science promotes itself as a program that allows students to investigate, design, build, and understand phenomena using a blend of hands-on, digital, video, and print resources. Twig is really known in the science community as a rich multimedia production company. So a lot of their videos and multimedia is very rich and engaging for students. This program does provide that anchoring phenomenon and student investigation model that the Next Gen Science Standards do call for. It has related driving questions and a storyline where students take on the role of a scientist. The curriculum includes hands-on, online labs, and paper-based learning, so it can really engage students in a multiple of ways to interact with science content. It does provide a strong set of assessment materials. One of the big strengths of Twig Science is their partnership with SCALE, which is the Stanford Center for Assessment, Learning, and Equity, and they are one of the leading creators of NGSS aligned assessment. There is literacy strongly throughout this program with support for EL learners for our Spanish DLI program and leveled readers so that we can reach all of our students. Some of the Spanish materials are still in development and won't be ready for next fall, but we do have a plan for the pilot for that. And professional development will be available for the pilot and for adoption if this material is selected. The teacher materials, which was another thing that our teachers really wanted to see, is very strong. It provides recommendations for teachers on making adjustments within the lessons. for students with disabilities, English language learners. There's challenge and extension opportunities, and the engineering that NGSS calls for is integrated throughout the lessons as well. The second resource that we are going to be looking at is Amplify Science. And Amplify Science promotes itself as a program that blends hands-on investigations, literacy-rich activities, and interactive digital tools to empower students to think, read, write, and argue like real scientists and engineers. Amplify has a real strength in literacy, as they were first a literacy curriculum company, and now they have branched out into the science field. They do provide anchoring phenomenons through students investigating multiple modalities, relating driving questions in a single storyline. And again, students are taking on the role of scientist, engineer, or other related professional. The student really is driving the storyline of the unit. Again, we do have hands-on labs, online, and paper-based learning. The really strong part here is the writing partners that Amplify has with the Lawrence Hall of Science and the National Science Foundation. Literacy development is built into the program with supports, again, for our EL students and leveled readers for all of our students. And there's generally multiple sources of reading that students are doing to help find evidence to solve whatever that role is that they are taking on. All units do support our dual language program with Spanish materials. Professional development is provided both for the pilot and adoption if selected. And again, the teacher's materials are really strong here as well, with instructional strategies to support all of our students with disabilities, our English learners, and again, to allow for extensions and challenge opportunities. The modules also include that engineering component, which the Next Gen Science standards call for. So who is going to be our pilot participants? First, we are very aware of the workload that our teachers are currently dealing with. So we wanted to make sure that we were not going to overwhelm our teachers in this process, but we did want to make sure that we got good feedback and that the teachers, again, felt like they were part of this process and it wasn't being done above them without their input. So we are going to have all 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science teachers participate. This does include our 3 DLI teachers so that we can have a common grounding experience for them, as they have all been working together this year and really becoming a cohesive PLC. As for our 4th and 5th grade, we will have half the 4th grade science team at Aldrich in our pilot, and then the entire 4th grade science team at Cunningham. For 5th grade, the science team at Fruzen will be joining us for the pilot. Teachers were allowed to opt into the pilot. You'll notice that there is no 4th or 5th grade representation from McNeil. We have talked to the teachers and the building administrators there, and they are comfortable with the decision that is going to be made by the group. They are confident in their colleagues' abilities to test and provide the feedback. One other thing that we wanted to make sure we were doing is, we know that there's an ELA pilot going on, and the 4th and 5th grade is that overlap. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't having our ELA teachers pilot this material. One other note is that our district biliteracy coordinator and then some of the project managers at the intermediate levels are also going to be having their eye on both materials and giving us some good feedback on how the materials look from their lens. As far as after we are done with each of the pilots, we are going to have our teachers give us some feedback, both in ranked scores and open response, and the items that they're responding directly respond to those look-fors back in the beginning of this presentation. Making sure that we have equity represented in the materials, literacy resources, that instructional design. Again, no curricular resource is going to meet every need that we have, but we really want to find what is the best fit for our students and staff. As far as the cost of the pilot, we were able to receive a grant from Twig. So we are going to be able to pilot their materials without any cost to our district, which is great. And then for Amplify Science, the only thing that they are asking us to pay for is the teacher resource kits. This is the hands-on manipulatives that teachers use in the class to help with that hands-on learning. That would be $9,510. And the nice thing about that is if we do choose Amplify, that is materials that teachers can use year and year over. So it would be coming less than what we would need for an actual implementation cost. Both vendors are giving us free professional development and student resources. So that's very nice of both companies. And then back to Kelly for the timeline.
All right. So our anticipated timeline for the pilot would be to really start with professional development later on in the month, late this month, and kick off in early December the pilot of our Twig, the Twig product. The Twig implementation would last 6 weeks of instruction, and we would wrap that up the last week of term 2. Amplify then would be brought in January to do professional development. We would have an 8-week instructional period with Amplify and wrap that up at the end of March. So our goal would be to be able to do some analysis of the responses to the pilot, and for Meredith and I to look at the cost of the implementation and some of the other kind of higher level items, and come back to the board, come back to this committee in the spring with a recommendation for adoption. We're trying to use this timeline to make sure that we can have a decision made before the end of the school year, if at all possible, because we would really like to be able to start the process of ordering materials so that we have them in hand for next year. And then if I guess we can open it up for questions.
Okay, let's open it up to Board Member Anderson. Do you have any questions?
Well, first thing I want to say is I'm glad that you guys kind of brought in the teachers' opinions and asked for their feedback on this, making these decisions, because we do got to take in consideration their workload that they're currently going through. So just right off the bat, so once we get done with this pilot program and they say, hey, we want to go with this one, is that going to be one that we're going to adopt and then implement next year?
So the goal would be if the teachers are in strong agreement and we feel really confident about the tool, then that would be our proposal back to the board. So we've constructed this timeline with the ability to have some flexibility in the spring, but if we can make a decision by June, both vendors would tell us that we should be able to adopt for next year. Okay, if we can't make a decision, then we will have to stick with what we have for another year.
Okay,
we're hoping to be able to move on to something better.
The next question would be so we got a grant and for Twig for this year. What are the chances that we could possibly qualify for another grant the following year? And if not, what are kind of the costs are we looking at in the future?
Meredith, do you want to address that question? I know you've had more conversations with them about granting.
Yep, so the grant would only be for the pilot. Implementation would cost us what the normal curricular cost would be. I have looked at the cost for both Twig and Amplify, and they both are fairly even for what that cost is going to be. It all is going to really come down to, are we going to look at a 5-year, a 6-year, or 7-year implementation? The further out we go, it costs more, but per year it's costing less.
Also, with most of these curriculum decision points that we would have to make regarding how many print materials we would get, and how many classroom kits and those kinds of things. And that really does define the cost.
Okay, great. And then my last question is, how are you guys planning on like the pilot program being affected with us doing it at distance learning?
Oh, I'm sorry, you trailed off.
Yeah.
Your question.
The question I had was, so how are you guys planning on that, us being at distance learning currently, how is that going to affect the pilot program?
Oh, that's a great question. Both of these programs have online platforms and print materials. And so we can actually do a combination of online learning with students that involve, in some cases, simulations, a lot of multimedia projects. These are really strong programs. Both of them are really strong in their online content. We will get teaching materials, and sort of similar to what we're doing for science right now. What we can distribute to students, we will. And what is not appropriate to distribute to students, we will have teachers doing demonstrations, maybe creating videos for students to watch, and then that will become part of the anchoring phenomenon that they will work through. This actually will enhance our ability to do science learning at a distance, because I think both of these programs have a much stronger online platform than what we've been used to. The teachers were quite excited about that part of these presentations.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, I do have a few questions. First of all, comments. I'm very glad to see that we are finally addressing the lack of science, I guess, in the intermediate schools. I have 2 boys that went through Fruzen, and I would say that their experience in science has been less than stellar. They're very excited now. They're in high school, especially our sophomore. He's just embraced it and loves science. And it's just unfortunate that it's taken a number of years to get to that point. I also would like to compliment you on on the outstanding collaboration that you've had with staff. I'm assuming when you had 33 responses in your surveys, how many approximately are there in the total staff?
There are about 12 science teachers from 6-8. And Meredith, you actually have the numbers up on here. I'm going to go back so that you can see. So if you look, we have 8 teachers for 4th grade, 7 teachers for 5th grade. You can kind of see how that breaks down. We have our 3 DLI teachers. We also invited the instructional coaches that work the 4 instructional coaches at the intermediate buildings. And any of our building administrators that wanted to come. We didn't have quite as many building administrators as maybe we would want, but it was also a Wednesday, and they're pretty busy on Wednesday mornings with TLCs and other work. So, but we did have some feedback from some of the building administrators as well.
But the overall response was almost probably 90% or above of staff.
Yeah. Yep. Anybody who attended filled out the form, so we were quite pleased.
Good. And that's what I'd really like to hear, because I think we need to have more of a bottoms-up approach whereby staff is very involved in the process and the selection process, and it's good to see that's happened. Let's see, you answered that question. Yeah, I was writing down questions as you were going through it, so most of them you actually did. Oh, one question I did have is, can you tell us at all, and maybe you might not have the history of this, but maybe somebody else does. What have we spent much on science curricula since the reconfiguration?
I didn't answer that question well. I think that's a great question. I have been trying to reconstruct some of that history, to be perfectly honest with you. I've been trying to reconstruct some of that history through the vendors, which is not our best source of information. But I don't know that we have. And I will just say as a scientist, so my PhD is in biomedical engineering. So and Meredith has done pretty extensive science research herself. So as scientists, when we look at the resources that we have for teachers now and know what's available and out in the world, we're pretty excited to move from where we are and into something new. And we think it'll be better for the teachers too. It'll be much more exciting.
That was one question I had as well was, what has been the reaction from staff, the science teachers in the intermediate level? I would imagine it's probably pretty exciting because they have something new to work with now. I know there's one teacher on the line with us now, which is great. I'd like to hear his feedback. And I don't know if there's comments from others that you've heard as well.
I can speak a little bit to the 4th and 5th grade teachers. Have the ability to talk to them through our Wednesday PLCs, and all the 4th grade teachers, they're very excited about what they saw. They were excited not only about the technology base, but also some of the text-based experiences that the kids will have a chance to use too. One of the things that my 4th grade teachers talked about was wanting a curriculum that wasn't solely on the iPad, wasn't solely technology driven. And both these companies that we're piloting will give us that. They also talked about wanting to have a leveled reading text for their science curriculum resource. And both of these pilots also offer that. So what they wanted, they were pleased that they were getting from these 2 pilots. Great.
Glad to hear that. Because I'm assuming that, and Dr. Keiser, you might be able to chime in on this as well. And I think the 2 of you that have helped to present this, the curriculum has a lot to do with, creating the excitement in the classroom for not just the students, but probably more importantly, the staff. And the more excitement you have there, the more learning becomes fun. And when that happens, then good things happen overall, I would imagine. Which means that not only do we have success in the classroom, the students have success, we start to see better results all the way through.
Absolutely. Being a math and science teacher by training and being a part of a lot of curriculum adoptions, the more you involve the staff in reviewing the materials and providing quality professional development, they get excited, and that translates to the students in the classroom. Absolutely.
Okay, good.
I'll just add very quickly, the statements that we included on this first slide here, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet points that are there are really pretty common, solid philosophies to anchor in if you're looking at good national professional organizations, NSTA or NCTM. I mean, these are common across STEM. The last one, Meredith and I have really added because we really do want to see a lot of enthusiasm in the classrooms. We want to go into the classrooms and see them as cognitively busy places with the students excited about learning, the teachers excited about what's happening. It'll help with teacher retention. It'll really help get the students involved and engaged, and that will help not just their science literacy, but their overall literacy and their math skills as well. So we really are embracing this joy for learning piece here.
I know Board Member Anderson brought it up as well, but with the distance learning, I mean, that's going to create some challenges, I would think, with science, because unless they can do it in their classroom there on an iPad and show the experiments of what they're doing, the kids aren't really engaged in the actual experiments that are going on. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the curriculums have adapted a little bit of their lesson plans. They have some distance learning guidelines, and lessons that teachers can pull from. But we do have teachers actually performing the lab experiments right in their classroom, and they are using their laptops and their iPads to live stream them. And as they're going through the hands-on activity, they are asking their kids questions and what's going to happen. And it's really been very fun to watch and listen to the students interacting with the teachers as they're doing those hands-on activities. So they're making it work.
Good.
Yeah, Meredith meets with the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers in a PLC every week. They've really been very, very creative this year.
Awesome. That's great to hear. I'm excited. I'm very excited for the kids coming up. This is way overdue. I think you guys have pointed that out, and I think it's been known for a while that this is way overdue. So, Board Member Anderson, do you have any more questions? If not, do we have any recommended actions?
So I would like to move approval of the 2020 to 2021 science pilots that include Twig and Amplify.
Okay, I will second that. And any further discussion? Oh, I just wanted to once again reiterate, I appreciate the fact that you've included staff as much as you have in this selection process, and the fact that, yes, we are spending some money on this because we have 2 of them, but it's great that we have a grant on one, which obviously will defray the cost somewhat there. But I'd much rather have you go through and select one, especially if it's over a 5 to 7 year implementation timeframe, choosing the one that the staff appreciates and enjoys the most. So I think you're going about it in a great way. I love the process. Okay, with any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving the approval of these 2020 to 2021 science pilots for Twig and Amplify, is that correct? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Good luck with that, and look forward to hearing which one ends up being the better choice.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your work on that. Okay, then we move on to number 4A, which is the Hanover Research. And Dr. Keyser.
Thank you, Board Member Wong. I've moved to a new microphone in the hopes that it was my microphone that was creating the garbledness. I'm going to share my screen here just to walk through the attachment. Soon, there it is. All right. So bringing before this committee agreement to partner and work with Hanover Research over the course of course of a year and a half. And what Hanover Research provides is a what they call research as a service. The idea of Hanover is, sorry.
Dr. Keyser, your mic is still spotty.
It is still spotty.
The quality is very poor. You seem to be having a lot of problems tonight.
I am having problems. Board Member Wong, can you try muting your microphone once? Maybe there might be feedback coming that way. Let's see if that works. Thank you. The tech office was giving us that thumbs up. So Hanover Research is providing a service to districts because over the course of many years, one thing that districts, large and small, run into is that there's a significant amount of research that needs to be done. Everything from low-level research of figuring out like what are your district demographic norms, so who are your comparables, to very large programmatic reviews of systems and structures or even strategic planning. And what Hanover has done is that it has provided a service of they take care of hiring the experts, and they partner and are able to provide a service to districts at a low cost. Now, I've worked with Hanover Research in other districts when they used to have a model in which it was based on the program or the research that needed to be done. They have since switched over to a approach where it's a subscription service, and so you work with them for during a subscription, and it is many projects that you want to do with them. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is an unlimited number. It is completely dependent upon the questions and the research that's being done. The challenges that are encumbered by districts, including ours, is that we want to make sure that when we do research that we are doing research that is authentic and that is reliable. And so having a third-party perspective is oftentimes a question that superintendents and boards will ask, in making sure that we aren't falling subject to our own blind spots when we're doing our research. Also, the capacity to do research taxes the human resources within the district, because research does take time, and it also does cost some money along the way. What Hanover provides as a resource is that they have the applications to do the research that is needed on demand by a district. So not only do they have the applications to do the research, do data analysis, gather the feedback, and benchmark you against other peers, but they can also identify key practices. They also have on staff all of the people that are needed to do authentic quality research, from data analysis to survey design, as well as the instructional generalists and the instructional tools. Their program evaluation example that they have is one that is listed here. So if there was to do a simple program evaluation, so let's say we wanted to do a program review of all of our science programs across the district. So take what we just heard about doing a curriculum resource adoption, and really say we want to do a whole-scale review of our science curriculum K-12. Well, to do that, we would sit down and we would say, all right, what capacity do we have? This is the question that we want, and how do we go about doing that? And you have to dedicate your resources and your money, and then also ask how much time do we have to do that? So what a program evaluation timeline would be with Hanover, we would sit down with them, they would map out, okay, this is our ask, this is what we need, this is the time constraints, and then they would be able to do that work and say, within a certain number of weeks, given these parameters, we can get that work done. And so they greatly simplify for a district the work that is needed to do research. But that research doesn't just limit itself to program evaluations. Here on this slide really speaks to some of the different areas in which Hanover has worked with school districts across this nation. So from a superintendent's level, anything from climate surveys to satisfaction surveys to benchmarking choices against peers. So i.e. evaluating our current district structure, elementary, intermediate, and high, against similar performing districts and similar demographic districts across the nation. From the curriculum side, where we talked about program evaluations, but we could also talk about feedback around, say, full-day kindergarten or researching best practices in early literacy. On the student services side, looking and evaluating our special education model, to evaluating our practices with our students in benchmarking against industry standards. And on the human resources and finance side, looking at evaluations of cost comparisons for programs or for transportation and so forth. This isn't to say that we can't do this research ourselves, but what it does allow us to do is to bring a different layer and a different lens and a different depth of the questions that we're able to ask, because we are able to basically offload the research component to a third party, and they can check in with us. Their solution and their approach is one that is built on making sure that we are meeting our academic challenges and minimizing the administrative challenges. So again, another look at the options that Hanover brings to the table. Anything from ensuring college and career readiness. So the research question could be, are we adequately preparing our students for the next level? To program evaluations, how do we measure our interventions and their return on investment compared to the programs that we support? To big theory questions around operations, are we maximizing our district resources, and so forth. The way they go about doing their work is they meet with us and they ask, what is it that you want on the tail end? Is it that you're looking for a toolkit or a guide or or a planning document? Are you looking for an on-site discussion, for a workshop? Or is it simply that you need research and access to data? And also, are you looking for dashboards or some data to be visualized for any of the things that I've mentioned? They can provide any and all of those, and through the consultation around a research question, these are one of the questions that these are some of the questions that they will ask. So I've gone through a lot of background, and in our minds we're saying this is a subscription service, and it sounds like there's a lot that's in there. And they basically layered their subscription into four tiers or four categories. The lowest category is access to their digital resources. So by becoming a client of Hanover Research, you automatically gain, as a district, access to their warehouse of data. So any data that they have done for districts is available for other districts to review. So sometimes you don't even have to ask the question because someone else has asked the question and the database has those answers within that. So that's what the digital piece is. Where Hanover Research has said in meeting with myself and the executive directors, they feel that we're at a level of custom where there are some bigger research questions that could be asked, but in reality, there are a mix of research questions that could be asked by our district administrators. And so by putting us at that custom tier, we're able to do that work. And if a question really rises to a level and complexity that we would need to move up a tier, that is something that can be done as part of the contract. So the agreement is for a specified amount based on our size and our socioeconomic status relative to our size. So districts that are a little bit larger than us, they're asking for this, pay a little bit more. Districts that are a little bit smaller, pay a little bit less. Districts that have different needs, they've scaffolded the payment that way. But if we need to really move up to the next tier, that is something that we just pay the difference of for if we move up in that subscription level. All 4 of the tiers are listed here. And so you can see at the custom tier, it is a lot of flexibility. And really the question becomes if we need to move to a higher tier, we're really talking about much more significant things. For instance, at that advisory level, it really talks about ambitious strategic objectives for our upcoming year and in-depth information. So if we had say, planning for a referendum project and we really needed to do some in-depth research around that, that would be something that would rise to the advisory level. Above that, the strategic level, really talking about large organizations that want to provide ongoing research and support across several units simultaneously. And that's a capacity issue. Again, working with Hanover Research, they feel in our entry point, the custom level is where we are at, and that's what the agreement is based upon. The idea of how they work with us is that they will, as part of the onboarding for a question, will say, we need access to this amount of data. And they are able to, with the fact that all they do is research, have the capacity and the tools to sync up with many of the common data streams that school districts use. So anything from things like Qualtrics and Panorama and K-12 Insight, which are platforms around surveys, to forecasting and analytic data like Bright Bites, Forecast 5, Schoology. We use EduClimber, and they've worked with districts with that. And then also looking at best practices. So they are all connected with all of the big names, the Council for Great City Schools, AIR, so the American Research Institute, and so forth. So they're able to leverage a lot of resources in order to answer the questions. The recommendation from the administration is that we enter into a 1.5-year subscription with Hanover Research at a total fee of $75,250. That's broken out at $27,750 for the remainder of this year and $47,500 for the next year. And they bill on a fiscal cycle, so it goes from July 1 to June 30th. With that, I'll open up for questions.
Okay, first of all, I want to apologize since the mic problem on your end was actually the mic problem on my end. I was causing that, so my apologies to the audience for that. And then opening it up to board members. Anderson, do you have questions regarding this proposal?
The one question I have is, what are the first kind of questions that you're going to ask once we get the subscription?
That's a really good question. There are multiple questions that we've talked about. In part, looking at from the lower level questions. Some of the questions that when I first came in, it was about who, when Beloit compares itself, who should we compare ourselves to? And there aren't many districts around us locally, and when I say locally, within driving distance, that are a lot like us. Demographically, we could compare ourselves to Milwaukee, but Milwaukee is many times bigger than us. So one of the research questions that we could ask them, and that I would ask them, is when we want to benchmark ourselves against other districts, look not only statewide, but look nationwide, what are some comparables to us? So that way, when we start to ask questions, we know some go-to districts that we could go look at, even virtually, to say, we're doing this, how are they answering that question? Because it is close demographically and size-wise to our context. On a larger scale, there are questions in terms of program reviews. So we are currently doing an ELA, an English language arts pilot, and a science pilot. Some of those questions are around, now we would have the capacity to say, let's do an external review of our programs and say, what's the next piece that we need to take a look at? And on the larger end, I mentioned it once before, we've done a realignment with our structure going PK3, 4-8, and 9-12, and to my knowledge, we've not asked the question, how is that working for us since we've done that? That would be an example of the large question that we would ask. And all three of those questions are questions that we would ask Hanover Research if we had a subscription with them.
All right, great, thank you.
It sounds as though there's a large database of research that's already available. So I'm assuming, and the question I have was in regards to the research advisor that we would have working with us. I'm assuming that this person is sort of a guide to kind of help us along the way it's not on an ongoing basis. I don't know how often it is, or if it's just a person we call on the phone. But that person as well is there to probably guide us to say, oh, we already have that in our database, or they can provide us that research that's already been developed. But secondly, I would think that research advisor's position to be able to say, okay, you guys are getting the level whereby you're probably need to move up to the next level. I mean, is that the person that would determine that?
I've asked that question, and you're right. It is a conversation, and the question really becomes in asking about help define what in their terms, and I want to quote it well. Ambitious strategic objectives for an upcoming year that need in-depth information and comprehensive level of hands-on support. In asking that question, what does that mean? What would be our person implementation or account manager has said. That's really if you're looking at a comprehensive referendum type question. So where the custom is really the broadest in terms of scope, because it's not generally when you're in that, you're not as time sensitive. So the larger the question, what moves it up to ambitious is the time frame. If we ask a really in-depth question that's going to take a lot of research, and they say at the custom level that's going to take us 8 weeks to complete, but if you need it in 4 weeks, we would elevate it to, and that would be more ambitious. So there's a lot of flexibility within the scope that we have. But you are absolutely right. It is a conversation with what would be our account manager who works with the team. And so it's not that it's like one in and one out. We can submit a handful of questions at once, and as they kind of queue it all up on their end, and they kind of give us a timeline. And they say, this one will take a couple of weeks, this one is more in-depth, this one would take 4 to 6 weeks, and this one's a really in-depth one, this one's going to take about 8 weeks to get done.
Who then is going to be responsible for, because this is obviously a subscription service, so we go in there, we ask a lot of questions, who's going to control the flow of information? Is that something that everybody's just going to be throwing out questions to them, or is there going to be sort of a a bottleneck that's going to come into?
It's a great question. Certainly, it's the access to the database of research is something that can be more open-ended. In discussions with the executive directors and myself, we would be the points of contact for Hanover research. So because we don't have a defined like director of research, I asked the question about in terms of points of contact, and they said we can have multiple points of contact if we want. So at this point, asking those research questions filter up to executive directors or myself, and then we know what we've given Hanover and the capacity for them to answer those questions.
And how historically have we done, this is probably a question for you, but for others, how historically have we done research or gathered the research data that we have had, or have we just not been gathering it?
From my perspective, in terms of, again, my conversations, and I open it up to others on my team, the research questions have always been, or have been told to me around, have been more localized. So if we wanted to do research on something, it's like, okay, let's pull together a team to do this. To my understanding, we have not invested in having a service like this. And I don't know the last time that we've outsourced research services for a particular question.
Okay, and then my last question, which is you've kind of walked into this, is how will this ultimately benefit our district? How do you perceive that?
I think it will benefit our district because it provides us the flexibility to ask the research questions and not just ponder the questions, because we say, that's a really interesting question. And usually the second question is, and do we have the capacity to follow up on that question? Having a subscription service like this takes away the barrier of asking that second question. So now we can sit down and say, I wonder how our structure of our district is impacting the outcomes that our students are experiencing. That's a really in-depth question and a really wonderful question, and one that we say, and do we have the capacity to do that? With something like this, we can ask that question, and we have proposed that as a hypothetical to Hanover, and they say, oh yeah, we've done many. Districts have asked that question in many variations. So we would contextualize it to yours. And then we also we can point you to other research that we've done for other districts who've asked similar questions. And you can read what we've done for them.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments or questions from committee members?
I do not.
The only thing that I want to say is I think it says 65,000 in the recommendation. It should be 75,250.
So that would be it'd be 75,250 is what you're referring to. Yeah, that's what it would add up to.
Correct, over the year and a half.
And this subscription would start upon approval then?
Would start yes, the agreement is, if approved at the end of this month, it would start December 1st.
Okay. Okay, hearing the presentation, thank you for that. And do we have any recommended action?
I move approval of the 1.5-year agreement with Hanover Research Council, LLC, for research services in the amount of $27,750 for 2020 to 2021, and $47,500 for 2021 to 2022 school years, totaling to $75,250.
Okay, and I will second that. Do we have any further discussion? I did notice on there you did have that this is a budgeted item, and this comes out of what budget line does this come out of?
Teaching and learning.
Okay. All right. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving the approval of the 1.5-year agreement with Hanover Research Council, LLC, for research services in the amount of $27,750 for the 2020 to 2021 year, and $47,500 for the 2021-2022 school year, totaling $75,250, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say by nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, then thank you for the presentation. That's I think this is exciting to hear. I know you've been excited about it. I know you've mentioned it to me, I think a month or two ago, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm sure it will get good use out of it, and hopefully provide us some great information that I think that we all need to know about what's going on within our district, but sometimes maybe we didn't want to know. But hopefully it's a lot of this will bring some of the truths out. Okay, the next meeting will be, let me get my calendar. Should have had that out there to begin with.
The 1st.
Okay. The 1st?
Correct.
Yep, that is correct. Okay. So the next planning and budget meeting will be on Tuesday, the 1st of December at 5:15, and virtual for those that cannot make it in person, and in person it will be a COLAC. And if anybody has any other items to add to the agenda, you can send it through the agenda request items. And let's see, that brings us to the end then. So do we have a motion for adjournment?
I move that we adjourn.
I will second that. All those in favor say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the presentations tonight. A lot of good information shared. Everybody have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Have a good night.